just shout out some ideas that come to mind for you. Quality of life. I mean, this is broad. I'm not specifically talking necessarily about transportation yet, but just quality of life. Okay, I'm seeing some great responses coming in. Access to recreation, I totally agree with that. Healthy, active people and families, being outdoors in the mountains. Choices, that's a great one. Epic scenery, totally, right? Like, you know, being in Utah, we're surrounded with beautiful scenery, beautiful landscapes. Ooh, good one. Access to opportunities. 100% agree with that.
Clean air. Where do you live?
Clean air. Clean air and open spaces. Yeah, air quality came up. Free time. Great. These are awesome. Enjoying the outdoors, housing affordability, rec and open space, safe neighborhoods. That's a great one we haven't heard. Work-life balance, absolutely. Access to entertainment, I should say. Jobs and housing. Man, this is great. I can't even keep up with all of them.
Why is Andy Hoka saying job?
Sounds like someone maybe went off mute to mention some, let's see, opportunities for fun. Totally, great. Well, thanks for indulging me in that, because I think that's a great kind of segue and introduction into just kind of this concept. So suffice it to say, you all have a great kind of vision for what quality of life means. And that is absolutely what the majority of Utahns also kind of think. So this really brings us to this, how does this then relate to Utah's transportation vision? Well, it all stems from quality of life. According to this, this survey done in 2018, we see that Utah was ranked number 5 for all the states in the nation for quality of life. And it's for those exact traits that you all just mentioned. This survey went a little more in depth and found, it is about safe communities. It's about access to opportunities, job, economic vitality, natural resources, recreation. These, like, the fact that we kind of live in this perfect kind of confluence, if you will, of all of these different aspects really plays into why Utah ranks so high for quality of life. I guess the reality is we can't beat Hawaii because of, I think they probably have the benefit of the beautiful, without snow, maybe for some people that would be a deterrent. But for the most part, yeah, we just have this great confluence of all these different aspects within our communities that really rank us really high for, quality of life and well-being for the states. So what does that mean? Well, that means a lot of, I think if I were to sum this up in a couple of words, it would be the secret's out. I'm a Utah native myself, as in I, grew up here, and I can definitely speak to this chart that I'm showing on the screen here. I had the privilege to grow up in Park City, Utah, and go to high school there, and it's definitely a very different Park City it was than it is today. And I think, like I said, that's the idea that the secret's out and that more people want to participate in this amazing quality of life that we have here. And it's demonstrated by, this chart that we're seeing of the growth in this throughout the state. This was provided by Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. It's obviously projections into the future about where we will be in terms of population by 2065. And you can see just this growth curve is just stepping up over the years. So with that, we have these really great amenities and assets within our communities and throughout our state. People want to be here. What has also been observed through some surveying work done is that huge demand on all of our resources is actually having an effect on the quality of life index. So this is as in the quality of life has actually been decreasing over the last couple of years, according to surveys. And I think that what this is demonstrating is that high growth, demand on these resources, the reality is it's actually having an adverse effect on what people are experiencing in terms of quality of life. I mean, I don't need to tell you all, I'm sure you could think on your own about this, but like just some examples, right? Like to try and access the ski resorts up Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon. You have to wait in a line of traffic, affectionately known as the red snake, on the way down because of just the line of brake lights. It can sometimes take a lot of time to get there. I mean, I obviously think about it as a transportation planner a lot in the lens of transportation, but I think this plays out in every aspect. Housing affordability is a huge one right now. Access to opportunities, the ability to have work near where you live, having access to recreation opportunities closer to home. All of these things kind of have started decreasing, or at least like there's a perception that this is becoming harder to come by due to the population growth that's occurring throughout the state. So again, based on the surveying work done by the Utah Foundation of this Quality of Life Index in 2018, the surveyors asked, what could most improve your areas as a place to live? Basically, help us understand what are the most important factors that would go into improving that quality of life that I just discussed. So these are the top 5 responses out of that survey: reducing traffic, improving affordable housing, improving air quality, improving roads and sidewalks, better condition, including lighting, and improving public transportation. So I don't know about you all, but I see 3 things directly related to transportation when I look at this list, which then dovetails into this idea of UDOT being needing to be at the forefront of this conversation around quality of life. So taking that information, right, like taking that and internalizing it at the DOT, there was a lot of discussion around this, and this happened, not many years ago, 2019, to say, okay, how can we take what we know about quality of life and what people value about this state, and how can we make sure that our transportation system is trying to align with this more. So it was stakeholder led and data driven to really dig into this question and say, okay, if we're hearing that traffic congestion is one of the huge contributors to people feeling like the quality of life is decreasing, how can we help with that? How can we make decisions that might improve that? How can we look at equity? In the left-hand side of the screen in green, you might see equity, and that's talking about affordable housing. That's talking about air quality. That's trying to understand where disadvantaged populations might live. So that's another component right there. I can't help but to point out economic vitality. As I said, that's one that is critically important, providing access, knowing that transportation and economic vitality really go hand in hand. So there was, again, a lot of conversations with a lot of people around how can we, at those that work in transportation, really internalize this quality of life aspect, and how can we have that become a driver, no pun intended, around access to opportunity and around the choices that people can end up making. So that really led then to this transportation vision. So all of that work, engagement, I'm not even remotely doing justice the amount of time and effort that went in from people, and likely a lot of people that are in this room today, to establish these 4 measures for Utah's transportation vision, also taglined as the pathway to quality of life. So they were summarized accordingly: good health, better mobility, strong economy, and connected communities. Think of those 4, rings, components of a Venn diagram coming together to say, this is what Utahns really envision for a good quality of life, is having good health, better mobility, connected community, and strong economy. So that then, gets pulled out or kind of expanded into this framework. And this framework really then becomes a guiding light, a kind of a beacon for the DOT to say, okay, how can we then ensure that the projects that we're working on and the projects that we're building really do legitimately embody these 4 components. And that's where I want to play this clip. This is the video that was put together kind of to summarize all of these components and into one just like quick 2-minute video. So I'll give it a shot. I should have turned I think I turned everything on to be able to display.
It's no secret that Utah is growing. As one of the
I'll pause. Is everyone hearing sound?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I will play it again.
best places on earth to live, work, and play. Many people who grew up here are staying, and many are coming here from other places. With this growth come both challenges and opportunities. At UDOT, we have the challenge of keeping Utah moving in the face of rapid growth, but we also have the opportunity to work with leaders, residents, and other stakeholders to shape our communities in new and better ways as we grow. We have an opportunity to help build the communities of our dreams. UDOT worked together with transportation agencies, community leaders, private and public sector stakeholders to develop Utah's transportation vision, a pathway to maintain and enhance our already high quality of life. We arrived at 4 key outcomes that our transportation system must deliver. It must provide better mobility. The system must support a strong economy. Transportation needs to take a greater role in promoting good health. Our system must connect communities. When transportation works well, it's a seamless part of everyday life. As we provide for better mobility with more transportation choices, it will quietly but surely strengthen the economy, promote better health, and connect all of us as members of stronger, more prosperous communities. In short, we'll create communities of our dreams that deliver quality of life to everyone that lives within them.
So there you have it, right? Your like feel-good video about the importance of this work in as it relates to transportation. I do have to point out that video is obviously dated because the 9th and 9th Mazda, I believe, is no longer there, but isn't that just, it was just interesting to see that. Oh, I think I'm playing it again.
It's no secret.
Don't need to see it again. So, okay, so we're on to the next kind of, now that I've summarized and given a little bit of a background around this, around UVision, about why we are here now and kind of having to contend with this, and that this is no secret and it's likely not new to any of you. I would really be interested to hear kind of your thoughts on, you know, the nexus between like this UVision and transportation, and then put that another way. So what would good transportation projects look like according to this framework? Try and think holistically, like think about modes and how, integrating different components together. And then we'll kind of jump into the next part of this conversation, which is about the framework and thinking about how then UDOT is prioritizing and funding projects. Okay, we have a couple coming in. Practical facilities that allow people to get to meaningful destinations. I like that. I like that word use of meaningful destinations. Having access to places that we all need and want to frequent, like having access to grocery stores, having access to parks, schools, things like that. Connected facilities. I think that's a great one. Maybe to elaborate on that, things like in the video that showed a section of the Mountain View corridor, and if you saw on the right-hand side, there was the multi-use trail that was adjacent, that was built as part of that. So maybe that's a thought or a project example, right, on connected facilities. Ooh, this one's really cool. Car-free access to outdoor recreation. I personally struggle with this quite a lot as an outdoor kind of enthusiast. I ski and bike quite a bit, but I also live in West Valley City, and having access then to how am I getting to these locations, and are there opportunities to take public transit or do those without a car? And so yeah, I can definitely attest personally to that one. That's a great comment. Had someone say, as a city employee, I hear concerns over speeds all the time. We should slow speeds to improve quality of life. I think this is one that's, yeah, I really like this one as well, because I think that's something that maybe doesn't get talked about as much, but that, yeah, it's definitely, that's a great one. Okay, anyway, so yeah, those are some really good ones popping up. I'm assuming you guys can see my this chat box too, and I'm sorry, I'm only working off of one screen here, so you're just gonna have to work with that. Connected multimodal network, the system needs to flow. I like that. I think that's a great thought. Things need to work seamlessly and be able to connect together. Projects that increase better choice for non-auto. Yes, the vision is great in principle. It looks like we have some questions coming out of that. Oh, the chat box is blacked out. Thank you, Jory. There's another one. Don't put bike lanes on higher speed, collector and arterial roads. Plan more separated, protected bikeways. Totally, right? Like having the network or a system that makes sense and that is designed appropriately according to kind of best design practices and standards. Awesome. Okay, I think those are some great examples of just these high level, like, okay, how does the nexus between transportation and quality of life come together? And those are some great examples of, like multimodal, like inter-system connectivity. So, I mean, another example could be making sure that you have access to transit, like that you can walk, or first last mile connections to transit. I always think of that as like, that's the ultimate example of kind of transportation systems coming together. So how does this then relate to the work that I mentioned at the beginning of some of the prioritization and funding work, right? So we've now, if you kind of imagine coming along on this journey of working with stakeholders, coming up with vision, being kind of committed to this idea of quality of life through transportation, how does then that play out in practice at the DOT? So this is a screenshot pulled from UDOT's strategic direction, and part of me wishes that Carlos was on this call so he could see that it's being used by a UDOT employee. But this is the funding, some of the funding allocations at the DOT. So this is for FY22, fiscal year 22. What I have, or I guess circled or boxed here, is the Transportation Investment Fund, also known as TIF. And you can see that that accounts for over 52% of UDOT's total funding. And so it's a very, very large chunk of money. And it's used for our capital kind of investment projects throughout the state. And so if we know that this is a huge kind of chunk of the funding, how can we then make sure that this idea of quality of life is integrated and is used to evaluate and prioritize projects to be considered for that funding? So that brings us then to this multimodal framework. So we have a huge pot of money that can go out to projects. How do we then, if we got to walk the walk here. We got to be on the forefront of using quality of life to decide what projects are going to be used. So again, through a lot of work done by, I'm sure, a lot of people in this virtual room, it was decided that coming up with this multimodal framework would help UDOT kind of understand or prioritize projects that really embodied this quality of life vision that we knew was really important to citizens across the state and across, legislatures and everyone kind of involved in decision making. So I'll just run through these really quick. So again, back to the 4 pillars: good health, strong economy, better mobility, and connected communities. But the devil's obviously in the details in terms of how do we actually look at, when we mean connected communities, what does that mean? Well, that means connectivity. And I'll get into what these mean according to each one of the 4 models and the 4 funding pools within TIF and TTIF. But connectivity, land use and community, and integrated systems. Those were definitely some words that I heard popping up when I asked the question to kind of think about some of these, the nexus between transportation and new vision. So better mobility, again, one that's very critical. So travel time, right? How long is it taking to get to a certain location, depending on where you are? Throughput. So this is, kind of jargony transportation word, but yeah, the throughput, how many people can we serve that can utilize a certain system? Risk and resiliency. This is another critical one. How can we make sure that our systems are resilient and able to bounce back from certain, whether they're natural disasters or anything kind of that nature. So strong economy. This is ensuring that we have accessibility, that our transportation systems are accessible. Transport costs. So this would be, the cost of the transportation system, as it were. Economic development, being able to ensure that our transportation network can actually can fuel economic development and make sure that we're actually being kind of proactive about the economic development throughout the state. Good health, safety obviously is huge. And at UDOT, we take safety really seriously and spend a lot of time thinking about safety and how to improve it. Public health, this is one that's absolutely near and dear to my heart. How can we, integrate public health into some of the decisions? And I'll get into this, but it is a consideration and something that we're always looking on ways that we can improve the integration of this. And environment, making sure that we're incorporating kind of environmental considerations when looking at this. So this then gets us to so we have that, if that's our kind of framework through which we're making decisions, that then gets kind of pulled into these 4 kind of models or funding these funding pools, so to speak. So again, think back to that screen grab I just shared about the strategic vision and how the strategic direction and how we have TIF as a large funding pool. Well, TIF actually then breaks down into, there's highway, so kind of highway projects that can be considered, but then there's TIF active transportation, so active transportation projects, biking and walking. And then within TTIF, which stands for Transit Transportation Investment Fund, we have the transit, which I understand is redundant, but that is that's capacity project for transit. And then first last mile, so TTIF first last mile. This is the connection of people, how they access the transit stop or station. So again, a kind of a separate program for projects that are first last mile related. So then, you know, you take that and then it gets pulled out. So TIF highway, TIF active, TTIF transit, and TTIF first last mile. So I know that this is, there's going to be a lot on these next 4 slides, but I think the biggest takeaway I want to demonstrate here is that there's been a lot of thought going into, okay, if this is our decision framework, we know we want it to be oriented around quality of life. What can we actually use for data that would help inform that quality of life and that decision framework? So again, you should recognize good health, strong economy, better mobility, and connected communities. But as you can see, this is for the highway model. So as in, if we're looking at highway projects, this would be the way that we're evaluating projects being considered as a highway project. So safety, so we're looking at things like we're able to evaluate, and we have data to evaluate safety. This is one, again, because UDOT works a lot in this space, we have a lot of available data. So public health, as it stands right now, we're looking at active transportation. Does the project, even though it's a highway project, does it incorporate an active transportation component? And no, this doesn't mean just like we striped a small bike lane on the side of the road. This is, you know, things like a separated, protected, multi-use trail, or some type of delineation between the facilities. Back to the comment about kind of designing a facility that is appropriate based on the roadway characteristics. That's kind of the method that we're able to look at here. Environment, so environmental integration. Is this, you know, did you take things like, you know, stormwater retention into consideration? Did you use native landscaping when you rebuilt the project, et cetera? Like being able to score a project more highly if they did that. Accessibility, so education and tourism proximity, transport costs, looking at, you know, does this facility accommodate trucking and at what percentage does it incorporate that? Economic development, so we're able, through our travel demand model, understand where we have current high densities of current employment, but then we can also look out and say, where are the locations where we're going to have future employment growth? And then economic designation index, does this area fall within an HTRZ or a TRZ designated by the legislature? Again, being able to be kind of flexible and accommodate that into this model. Better mobility, looking at reliability and delay. Data that we have readily available at the DOT, so this one's you know, easy to implement. Throughput, looking at current and future volumes on that projected, you know, roadway or highway. And then risk and resiliency, just taking a look at redundancy. Does this facility provide redundancy to our system? Connected communities, looking at future population growth there, and then plan consistency. So able to say, is this facility a part of your plans, you know, kind of your master plan for this area? Just making sure that we're honoring the planning work that's being done at the local level. And then integrated systems. So for this, looking at, are there transit components as a part of this highway project? So jumping then into the TIF transit model, as you can see, the very same good health, strong economy, better mobility, connected communities. However, the data is different within each one of those, right? Because you can't take the same data for a highway project as you do a transit project. So again, looking at good health, we are still looking at safety, public health, able to prioritize projects that are in areas with low physical or high physical inactivity. And then if awarding a project more, if it's in an air quality designation area. Economic connectivity is a consideration, commute costs for the transport costs, economic development similar to highway current and future employment. Better mobility, we can look at the reliability component index for the transit component. Throughput, we're looking at system ridership change if that specific transit system was to be installed or improvement was to be made. Connected communities, looking at future population growth, looking at if the project connects to low income areas, and then plan consistency, similar, honoring the planning work that's already been done, and then multimodal connectivity index, understanding if there's additional multimodal considerations. Active, the big changes to this one are that we're looking at within the better mobility, we're looking at the active transportation demand. It's kind of also known as latent demand. We're also looking at the level of traffic stress. So this is back to that comment about a facility that is like a striped 5-foot bike lane is maybe not the right facility for a 7-lane arterial road. It would need to be a separated multi-use trail. And then connected communities, similar outcome areas that we look at there. And then last but not least is the first last mile. This one's actually extremely similar to active transportation and the Tif Active model. Okay, so you've now gotten a kind of a peek into how that's the framework that's used. And I'm in the last kind of home stretch of the slides, and then we'll get into questions. But if you wouldn't mind kind of thinking through this question, based on good health, strong economy, better mobility, and connected communities, what are some of the projects that come to mind for your specific community? So before we were talking really high level, like the nexus between transportation. Now I'd love to just hear some ideas on what are the projects themselves in your local community that come to mind when you think of, a project that is that has a good health component, or that has that is going to connect and enable a stronger economy. Just start kind of just thinking through those, through some of those projects that kind of come to mind. Any projects that come up? Ooh, we had one, so transit up State Street in Utah County with protected bike lanes. Every road in my downtown needs to be made safer. So there we have the, the connection to the good health. UVX, that's an awesome one. So if for those, so UVX, the bus rapid transit in Utah County, I think that's a really great example, thinking about our roadways as multimodal and using active transportation as well as transit connections. All the regionally important active transportation projects funded through the 35 million and 40 million state funds. So yeah, we're getting huge investment kind of in active transportation to be able to kind of incorporate those into our transportation system. Awesome. Yeah, some great examples popping in there. So I'll just end with kind of this quick description then of, so if those are the measures that we're that we're using to evaluate those within those 4 models. What then for TIF, I'm going to focus just on TIF Active and the Tif First Last Mile. What are the considerations that you all potentially, if you're at a community, you might want to consider if you would like to pursue funding through the TIF Active and Tif First Last Mile funding. So the TIF Active projects and those are, so local communities can nominate these active transportation projects to be put through prioritization to be considered for funding. It does require from a local community a 40% match, everything except UDOT administered state dollars. So, so a project essentially through that TIF Active funding, UDOT can pay up to 60% of the project cost, and then. But there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for that 40% match, because it can be in kind, it can be right of way, it can be, local funding, county funding, et cetera. There's a lot of ways to kind of bring that match, and you can bring multiple sources together to fund a project. The projects need to be paved. And the project does not need to be on a UDOT facility. I think a lot of people hear that this is a UDOT funding source and they assume that it has to be on a UDOT facility. That's not the case. It can be off of a UDOT facility. The local community does agree to maintain the facility in the future. And then the project does need to be on a UDOT active transportation plan. That's something that essentially UDOT rolls up all of the local plans into kind of a large, just imagine a statewide active transportation plan, again, honoring the local planning work that's being done. And so, yeah, it will get rolled up into our statewide active transportation plan. And then last but not least, the project should demonstrate a reduction on a state facility. Back to this whole, like, we're creating choices, we're creating options. The hope is that by creating these facilities, these high comfort facilities, you're actually, you're creating a mode shift potential there that is then realized. So I have on here TIF Active, thinking big, right? Like, these projects should demonstrate high comfort, separated whenever possible, some legacy projects. I just want to kind of throw out some visual representations of what we mean when we say, separated and thinking big, off of the roadway, above curb, separated whenever possible. These are kind of national examples. Here's a great one in Portland, and I love this one because it also integrates kind of light rail and shows that nexus there. It's pretty much all modes, demonstrated here. But then, we absolutely have some really laudable examples here in the States. This is that Tech Corridor project that's got a lot of attention, and that finish up, you can see, obviously, yeah, it's an interchange project, right? But it also has a really great integration of a multi-use trail, kind of ensuring that people can bike and walk through this area as well. And then lastly, this is an image of the Bryce Canyon multi-use trail. I guess I should have been clear. These projects specifically weren't funded through TIF, but they are, the idea in showing them is that it's these big projects that absolutely could be considered under as eligible under that umbrella. So then the Tif First Last Mile projects. Kind of, so shifting gears, what makes an eligible project, right, for the Tif First Last Mile? Well, those are local communities have the ability to nominate the active transportation projects to be put through that prioritization process. And it needs to be, these first last mile projects, they need to be pedestrian or non-motorized transportation project that provides a direct connection to a public transit system, so a stop or a station. The local government or district is responsible for maintaining the facility into the future. And then similar to Tif Active, as it stands right now, there's currently a 40% local match required by the local community. And it's the same stipulations, everything except UDOT administered state funds can be used for that match. So just, this one, I think I love this example. And again, to be clear, this specific project wasn't funded through TTIF First Last Mile. However, I think it's a beautiful, honestly, example of what this TTIF First Last Mile funding is intended to be used for. You can see in the yellow, so this is, to give you some context, this is Utah Valley University on the left-hand side of the screen, and then you have the Front Runner and UVX station on the left, or the right, I'm sorry. And obviously in between there, you have I-15, you have, utility corridors, you have you have Union Pacific rail lines. There's a lot of stuff happening in between. But take a look at that yellow line. So that was the route that someone biking or walking would have to take in order to get from the Front Runner station or the UVX station out to Utah Valley University. But take a look at that, the pedestrian bridge and how that, cuts that distance down quite a bit and creates just this pretty seamless now connection from the university back to the Front Runner and UVX station. So this is an example of thinking big when we think about TIF First Last Mile projects. So this is my final slide, and then we're going to jump into some Q&A. It looks like I'm right on time to have 10 minutes of Q&A at the end here. But so why? I think, why spend all of this energy and effort on kind of creating these and trying to create these types of active and first last mile projects that are huge, and big in the scale? Well, I think I think with having this U vision and thinking really critically about quality of life, and knowing that in the future we're just going to see more population and more kind of demand on our systems, we have an opportunity to fund and construct bigger, more significant active transportation projects across the state. And really, kind of now is the time to do that and to prioritize that. I love this visual. It's literally just like scale jumping, right? We're going from kind of thinking in one way to trying to jump in and think about this in a whole new and kind of bigger and more improved, I guess, way. So now that sums up kind of the presentation. In theory, you've caught the vision now, and you understand about Utah's transportation vision and how it relates to a lot of the work that UDOT does, and the funding and the project prioritization. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I will open it up for kind of questions and or comments at this time. I think we can do those in the chat, but we can also just raise your hand or just speak up, unmute your mic, and I'd love to talk about questions. I'm just starting to go through the chat too, because it looks like things were there's a lot of chat activity in the chat right now. Yeah, I'm hearing they're just reading some comments around speed limits on state facilities and other streets just kind of in downtown. I think that's a really great and great consideration and great thought. Okay, we'll not maybe hearing any specific questions at the end of that presentation. You know, I'm happy to stick around. Looks like, oh, interesting. Levi brought up a great question. I like the scoring criteria that ties projects to the vision. In some cases, though, projects have a negative impact on some components of the vision. Are projects ever docked points for having a negative impact? That's a really great question, Levi, and thanks for bringing that up. The way that the model is currently set up, no, they're not. There's not kind of like a negative point, or that you get docked, as you put it. But that's definitely something to kind of think about and consider, because you're right. Like, there's absolutely some projects that could have a more negative impact. So yeah, really good question, or I guess comment there, and something for us to think about, because maybe I didn't point this out, that the prioritization process is, it's never kind of, or I shouldn't say never, but at least as it stands right now, it's not set in stone, and like we can't ever change it. It's absolutely kind of an evolving process, and something that we look to update when there's better data available, or better information, or just kind of the sentiment around certain things maybe changes or shifts. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Levi. Good question. Let's see. So it looks like Mike West, also the thirst to achieve a good LOS on roads often induces travel demand and leads to traffic failure anyway, while also leading the LOS or level of comfort levels of F for active transportation. Right, I can see what you like. I heard this being brought up in a lot of circles recently, is how, like, can we just thinking about the level of service as a measure, and are there other measures to be used when we think about level of service? And the one that you just brought up, level of comfort, yeah, I think that is a really good point. And trade-offs, right? Like, how are things, if we achieve a high level of service, what impact might that have on the other modes? So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Safety seems to be a big driver in scoring. How do you assess this? Yeah, good question, Anthony. I didn't really have time, obviously, to get into like the details on that, but as you absolutely pointed out, it is a big consideration. It's the big one in this is looking at crash and collision history, and on that area, and taking a look at where. So essentially, if the project has, or that location where the project would be located has a high collision rate, it would get a higher score under the safety measure. So collision history. And we even break that down by killed or serious injury versus, just damage to property. This one's a pretty intricate measure, and I think, in a good way, as in we're really trying to tease out the nuance around safety when we look at the collision history. Looks like, okay, so it looks like the next session is going to start at 10 a.m. You're welcome to start kind of transitioning over. I'll just keep answering a couple more questions that have come in up until 10. So about 20% of roadway scores is the reliability and delay of travel times, which to me correlates with travel speed. Am I seeing that correctly? That might there be a move to focus on volume rather than speed? I'm gonna, yeah, Shauna, I think I need to get kind of some clarification on that question, but I'd be happy to kind of follow up with you on that. Looks like the next one, congestion and delay have heavy weights in prioritization. Can we use a delay curve? Yeah, similar to that, what's used for transit, ATO. And just a clarification, ATO standing for access to opportunity, to model people's willingness to endure delay, i.e. not use the set of level of service for decision making. Yeah, I think that's a really great kind of question and comment around that, and just some of the realities of using that, using kind of congestion as having that be a heavy weight and like reliability. To me, equity should be visually included throughout all measure as a reminder. I tend to agree with that comment a lot. Like that's something that we should just continue to focus on and at least demonstrate in kind of many different measures, right? I think this is one that could be demonstrated in so many different measures. So yeah, I think that's a really good comment there, that equity could and maybe should be emphasized more. A comment from Alex at UTA, speed and reducing delay takes projects in the opposite direction from planning for safety. Yeah, I think this is totally, it's like there's a lot to this, and I think that it's about, right, like the trade-offs associated with, right, speed and delay, but then how that affects safety. So there's a long answer to that, but again, a lot of work being done at UDOT to try and understand some implications of safety when considering these like other factors. It looks like Carly, it looks like you raised your hand. Maybe we'll loop you in. Can't hear you, Carly, if you're talking. Oh, that was a mistake. Got it. Okay. Sorry. Okay. It looks like we just have 1 minute left. So I'm going to copy all of these questions and kind of comments, because I think these have all been really, really great. But I just see a really kind of long question. I'm not sure we have time to get kind of into the weeds on that one. But I'm literally just trying to copy all these questions and comments, because this has been a great
Stephanie
conversation. Yeah.
This is Andrew Gruber. Can I make one comment out loud, please?
Sure, please.
I just want to thank you and everybody at UDOT. We should not take for granted having a state DOT that is willing and eager to think holistically about the role of the transportation system and mobility, and think about multiple modes and the intersection with land use, and be so open to all of this engagement and dialogue to try to do the best job possible. I just wanted to acknowledge that and say, Stephanie, and for all of you at UDOT, thanks, and thanks for being such great partners.
Thanks, Andrew. That's awesome. Appreciate that comment. Awesome. Okay, thank you guys, everyone, so much. We're right at 10. I really appreciate, and I appreciate kind of the engagement throughout the presentation. Open door, reach out to me for, questions or comments on this, or any of kind of the UDOT partners that you might work with on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, it's as I think Andrew put it really well, and that this is definitely a prioritization. This is a priority at the DOT, and I hope I kind of demonstrated through kind of the history and the progression that this is something that we're looking at really closely. So have a great rest of the session, and a great rest of your day, everyone.